What's up, everybody? This is what's really inside the big, beautiful bill. I seen this video. I figure I'll share it. Everybody wants to know. Everybody's giving their opinion on it, but no one actually knows what it says. So let's get into that.
Pages long, and it's about to change everything from your taxes to your student loans to Medicaid. Most people will never read it, so I did. And in this video, I'm breaking down the wildest, weirdest, and most important parts, so you actually know what's coming. Some of it might help you. Some of it might hit you where it hurts. Let's find out what's really inside. This section of the bill focuses on changes to federal nutrition programs, especially SNAP, the supplemental.
Jesus Christ, what's going on with my internet, man?
This is the big, beautiful bill. It's over 900 pages long, and it's about to change everything from your taxes to your student loans to Medicaid. Most people will never read it, so I did. And in this video, I'm breaking down the wildest, weirdest, and most important parts, so you actually know what's coming. Some of it might help you. Some of it might hit you where it hurts. Let's find out what's really inside. This section of the bill focuses on This is the big, beautiful bill. It's over 900 pages long, and it's about to change everything from your taxes to your student loans to Medicaid. Most people will never read it, so I did. And in this video, I'm breaking down the wildest, weirdest, and most important parts, so you actually know what's coming. Some of it might help you. Some of it might hit you where it hurts. Let's find out what's really inside. This section of the bill focuses on changes to federal nutrition programs, especially SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It's under Title I, Subtitle A, and it covers everything from how food benefits are calculated to new work requirements and who qualifies. If you or someone in your family uses food assistance, this part is especially important. These changes affect how benefits are measured, who gets them, and how states are expected to manage the program moving forward. So the government's official food benchmark, called the Thrifty Food Plan, is basically how they calculate how much support a family gets through SNAP. Under this bill, they're freezing the structure of that plan. No more frequent updates based on modern nutrition science or changing eating habits unless certain conditions are met. The only thing that's going to change each year is the cost, adjusted for inflation using the Consumer Price Index. What that means in practice is if healthy foods get more expensive or people's dietary needs shift, the benefit levels won't keep up. The plan stays locked unless the USDA decides to do a full reevaluation, and they can't even consider that before 2027. And even then, they're not allowed to increase the overall cost of the plan. It has to stay budget neutral. So even if food prices rise, the value can't increase beyond what's already been allocated. Also, no matter how big your family is, SNAP benefits cap out at 200% of the base four-person household allotment. So families with more than 8 people can't get proportional increases after that point. Then there's the update to work requirements. If you're between 18 and 65, able-bodied, and not working at least 80 hours a month or enrolled in training, you risk losing benefits. There are a few carve-outs. If you're under 18 or over 65, pregnant, medically unfit for work, or caring for a child under 14, you're exempt.
So let's talk about that. That's one of the biggest issues everybody talk about. Oh, they cutting off millions of people. No, if you between the age of 18 and 65, you must work or train for 80 hours a month to keep benefits. So if you getting cut off, because you between the ages of 18 and 65 and you can go get a real job. So why work a job just to keep some goddamn benefits? You go out there and get a real job. But you see, that's not what they telling you. Oh, they cutting people. No, they just cutting people who can actually work. That's just it. You can actually work. You can work a job. You healthy. You fine. You getting cut. There's no more of that free money shit. That's all. But they making you believe that people who deserve it is gonna get cut. If you sick, if you elderly, if you disabled, you still gonna get your benefits. But that ain't what they tell you.
Also, members of federally recognized tribes and urban Indians are excluded from the work requirement. But the enforcement is getting stricter. Waivers that let states temporarily pause these rules. Much harder to get now. For Alaska and Hawaii, they can still apply for waivers as long as they're showing good faith efforts to comply. But those waivers expire by the end of 2028, and the states have to submit quarterly reports to show they're making progress. If they don't, the federal government can cut the waiver short. Something else that's changing is how utility costs factor into these SNAP calculations. Right now, households receiving energy assistance can qualify for a higher deduction when determining how much food aid they receive. That helps lower their countable income. But this bill restricts that. Only households that include an elderly or disabled member can continue using the standard utility allowance. All other households lose that benefit, and internet expenses are no longer counted at all. Even though people use internet access for job searches, remote work, school, and accessing benefit portals, the bill now says those monthly service fees can't be used as part of the shelter cost.
So once again, this is just saying elderly or disabled households get standard utility deductions. So the old people or the disabled, they're not losing anything. Internet expenses are no longer counted towards SNAP calculations. That means like when they ask you, do you pay rent? Do you pay bills? Do you do this? Do you do that? That's all part of your calculation of how much food stamps you gonna get. But they already do that. If you tell them you got a cell phone, they don't count that bill. So these are things they already do. They're just gonna start enforcing it, but that's not what they tell you. They just said, "Oh, he's cutting benefits, and millions of people are gonna lose these benefits." And OP. That's all they tell you, but they don't specifically tell you. And when you read the bill, like the only people who gonna lose benefits is the people who out here faking like they need these benefits. The people out here who don't want to go to work. You know, welfare or the state or SNAP give you 300 max. And like cash, I don't know, but they give you like what, 400? You'd rather live off of 400 a month than go get a job and make 400 a week. And 400 a week is low. That's minimum. That's low. I don't get it. But anyways, let's get back to
cost deduction. So, SNAP benefits won't reflect that very real modern expense. Now here's something that could affect states more directly. There's a new cost-sharing rule tied to how accurately states manage their SNAP payments. If a state has a low error rate, under 6%, they keep full federal support. But if the error rate climbs above 10%, they'll lose 15% of their federal funding for those payments. And if they're somewhere in the middle, they still get reduced funding. So states now have a reason to be extra strict on processing, which could mean tougher verification or longer wait times for applicants. Another federal pullback is on administrative cost sharing. Up until now, the USDA covered 50% of a state's administrative costs for managing SNAP. Starting in 2027, that drops to just 25%. So states have to find more funding on their own to keep the programs running, which again could lead.
So, this is another thing I always tell people. Your local elections are more important than who in the White House. Who run your city and who run your state is more important than who in the White House. I'm going to say it one more time. Who run your city and state is more important than who in the White House. Because you can have somebody fucked up doing a bad job in the White House, but the people that run your city and state, if they're doing their job, you gonna be all right. And that's exactly what he just said. The government is taking 25% back. Like, yo, starting in 2027, we normally give you 50% of the help for your SNAP. Now we only giving you 25%. And it's up to you, the state, to figure out the rest. So, if you voted locally and you got good people running your state in your city, guess what? You're going to be all right. But in Massachusetts, do you really think you got good people running your city and state? I don't.
To fewer staff, more backlogs, or slower service for people applying. There's also a funding cutoff for the National Education and Obesity Prevention Program. That program funded nutrition education in communities, things like healthy eating classes, how to shop smart on a budget, or outreach on diabetes prevention. It's being ended after 2025. So public health education tied to SNAP benefits might quietly disappear over the next year or so.
So what this is saying is it's no longer SNAP benefit. It's no longer SNAP's problem to get you educated. It's no longer SNAP's problem to teach you about your diet. It's no longer SNAP's problem to wrap you up at night and put you to bed. You know, we already fill up your belly. You want us to wrap you up, pull the covers up to you, and read you a fucking bedtime story. What this is saying is, nah, we not doing none of that no more. You gotta educate yourself. Or maybe you gotta get with your doctor's office and educate yourself with your doctor. But SNAP, we not doing that no more. Just saying, that's what that says. Which is not a problem.
Lastly, there are changes to who qualifies for SNAP based on immigration status. From now on, only U.S. citizens, lawful permanent residents, certain Cuban and Haitian entrants, or those lawfully residing under a compact of free association agreement can receive SNAP benefits. Everyone else, including many legal non-citizens with temporary or uncertain status, will no longer qualify. And even though someone might be ineligible themselves, their income still counts against the household when calculating benefits.
So, no more illegal immigrants or none of that are going to be getting benefits. Beautiful.
For mixed status families, that can result in lower support, even if only one member is technically ineligible. All these changes add up to a much tighter system, less flexibility, more restrictions, and higher pressure on both states and individuals to meet the rules or risk losing access.
Right, so the state gotta do their job. You just heard them say it's more pressure on the state and the individual to do what you gotta do to meet these requirements. So, to everybody that's getting free money and don't want to get cut off, I don't know, maybe you should be acting more crazier. Maybe you should be acting more loopier. Maybe you should fall down the stairs and break your arm or something. I don't know what you should do, but if you able, you just gotta go to work. So all the people telling you the big beautiful bill was cutting this and cutting that and all these people that's getting cut are gonna be able. If you've been following the video or you go back to the beginning of the video, disabled and elderly are still gonna get their money. See, they not telling you that. So all these politicians, they fighting for people who are able to work.
This section of the bill covers Medicaid reforms under Title VII, Subtitle B, Chapter 1. It's focused on how states determine eligibility, how they handle enrollment, and how they manage costs. There's a clear shift here toward reducing federal spending by cracking down on what lawmakers are calling waste, duplication, and fraud. But what that actually means is a much more rigorous process for people applying for or staying on Medicaid. If you've ever had to recertify your benefits or help a family member navigate Medicaid forms, this part might feel especially familiar and maybe a little frustrating. So here's where it starts. The bill freezes two major Medicaid rules that would have expanded access to people in low-income or elderly groups. One was meant to improve enrollment in Medicare savings programs. The other focused on making it easier to qualify for Medicaid, CHIP, and the Basic Health Program. Both are now on hold under this new law, blocked by a moratorium. And that's just the start. States are now required to reduce duplicate enrollment between Medicaid and CHIP. In theory, that sounds efficient. But in practice, it could mean more red tape for families who have children covered under CHIP and adults on Medicaid. If systems don't talk to each other well, which many don't, families could lose coverage for reasons that have nothing to do with income or need. They're also targeting people who have passed away but are still marked as enrolled in the system. States now have to regularly check for and remove deceased individuals from Medicaid rolls. Same goes for deceased providers. Doctors or clinics that are still showing up as billable, even after they're gone. Again, this is being presented as a cost-saving measure, but it requires new systems, new software, and more oversight, which many states are already struggling to keep up with.
So, you seeing this bad because they want to get rid of dead people that's passed away and still getting billed and still getting insurance? No, that's good. Oh, well, we got to pay for more systems and all that. Yeah, but we're paying people and people are getting billed that's dead. That doesn't make sense to say that part of the bill is bad. But who am I? I don't know.
And then we get to payment reductions. If states are making excess payments, meaning they're paying more than they should be for certain services or beneficiaries, the federal government is going to reduce the money it sends them. It's a way of saying, clean up your books or we'll send you less. Another big change is how often eligibility redeterminations happen.
I mean, that sounds good, right? If, the state is letting medical departments charge extra, because we know a mass health person gets charged more than a private insurance person. So if you get caught doing that, you're not going to get no money. So that means, once again, your state got to do their job and make sure they getting the best deal and make sure people on mass health are not getting overcharged. Nothing wrong with that.
Basically, states now have to recheck whether someone still qualifies for Medicaid more frequently. So if your income goes up, or if your paperwork doesn't get submitted on time, you could be kicked off. This is especially tough for people with fluctuating income, like hourly workers, gig workers, or anyone in seasonal jobs. And then there's the...
Well, if you an hourly worker and you a gig worker, you shouldn't be needing food stamps. If you working hard and you busting your ass, you shouldn't be needing food stamps. So I don't agree with him there.
Home equity limit. Right now, Medicaid has a rule that if your home is worth too much, you might not qualify for long-term care support. This bill tightens that rule even more. It raises the threshold states can use, but also gives them the option to use lower limits if they want. That could hit seniors hardest, especially those who own their homes but live on fixed incomes. The next part of the section deals with immigration and emergency Medicaid.
Well, at some point in their life, a senior that's old and disabled and can't work anymore should be wrapping up their stuff, ready to sell home, go into nursing homes so you can fund that, or move into a child's home so they can take care of you, and you sell that house to pay for those costs. So once again, I understand that one too.
Restricts Medicaid access to certain non-citizens. Again, reinforcing that eligibility is tied to...
The reason why you should be getting ready to sell your elderly parents' properties and stuff, because here's another fucked up rule in Massachusetts, but if your family member's home is in their name and it's not been changed 5 years prior to them going into a nursing home, the nursing home could then take that home to pay for their care. So this is not bad. You should be preparing your family and getting rid of that property or changing it out their name anyway.
Directly to lawful status. At the same time, it expands federal Medicaid support during emergencies, like natural disasters or public health crises, so states can still provide short-term care in urgent situations. Now, moving into spending oversight, the bill places a pause on implementing staffing rules for long-term care facilities. That was a rule designed to make sure there were enough nurses and caregivers in nursing homes. By freezing it, facilities aren't required to hire more staff, even if residents need more care. This could reduce costs for nursing homes, but it might also reduce the quality of care for patients, especially seniors. States are also being pushed to reduce their Medicaid costs across the board. That includes limiting who can qualify, lowering reimbursement rates, and cutting back on services that go beyond the federal minimum. And here's one that's making headlines: banning federal payments to certain providers. This clause targets prohibited entities, which could include organizations that provide abortion services, depending on how states interpret the law. The exact impact is still unclear, but it opens the door to broader restrictions on where people can receive care, especially low-income women. The next set of rules go after financing strategies that states have used for years. Things like provider taxes or state-directed payments. Basically, creative ways states use federal matching funds are now facing new restrictions. Some states rely heavily on these mechanisms to keep their Medicaid budgets balanced, so tightening them could cause ripple effects on access and services. There's also a new requirement that Medicaid demonstration projects, these are state-level experiments with new care models, must now be budget neutral. That's not totally new, but the language here gives federal authorities more power to enforce it. So states won't be able to pilot new ideas unless they can prove up front that it won't cost more. And finally, this section introduces community engagement requirements, also known as work requirements, for certain Medicaid recipients. States must now require certain adults to work, volunteer, or participate in approved activities in order to maintain coverage. This doesn't apply to everyone. There are exemptions, but for adults without dependents or disabilities, it's a big shift. The idea is that people should contribute if they can. But critics argue.
So he says adults without dependents and disabilities. So if you ain't got no kids to take care of and you ain't disabled, you should be fucking working. That's common sense. That you don't got any dependents and you don't got no disabilities. Why would you be getting help from the government? You should be fucking working. Common sense, folks. But they telling you the bill is fucked up. No, this is a common sense fix of our system.
It often punishes those with unstable job situations or limited transportation options. They're also tightening cost-sharing rules. That means more people could be required to pay small amounts, co-pays, or premiums to stay enrolled in Medicaid. It's not a huge dollar amount per person, but for people living paycheck to paycheck, it could be just enough to push them off the program. So overall, this section is all about stricter oversight, tighter eligibility, and more pressure on states to cut costs. Supporters say it'll make...
Right. So now, once again, that pressures your state to make sure you're not being overcharged. That pressures your state to stop making agreements with these pharmaceutical companies and letting them overcharge us. Common sense.
Make Medicaid more efficient and accountable. But for people trying to navigate the system, especially those with limited income or shifting circumstances, these changes could make it harder to stay covered or even to get enrolled in the first place. This section comes from Title VII, subtitle Chapters 1 and 2 of the bill. It's all about taxes, specifically cutting them for the middle class, families with kids, and yes, seniors. There's been a lot of political talk about this being a tax relief plan for working Americans, and some of that's true. But when you actually read the details, you start to see where the benefits land and where they don't. There are some permanent cuts, some temporary boosts, and a few new ideas like removing taxes on tips and overtime pay. But there are also limits, trade-offs, and income thresholds that could quietly leave some folks out. So let's start with the basics. The standard deduction, which is the amount you can subtract from your income before taxes are calculated, is staying high. That's good news for most taxpayers. It's especially helpful for people who don't itemize their deductions, and that includes a lot of retirees. The bill locks in this increased standard deduction, so it doesn't shrink back down in a few years like it was originally set to. Now here's something more specific to seniors. There's a temporary senior deduction being carved out. While the bill removes most personal exemptions across the board, it makes an exception for seniors by allowing a special deduction just for them. That means if you're 65 or older, you'll still get a break that younger taxpayers won't. But it's important to know that this senior deduction phases out at higher income levels. So if you're a retiree with a decent pension, investments, or other income, you might not qualify for the full amount. And guess what? They're also adjusting the child tax credit again. This one's interesting because it's being expanded, and it'll now include a more generous formula that makes it easier to qualify for the full credit, especially for families with more than one child. The phase-out thresholds are still there, but the credit itself is bigger, and more of it is refundable, meaning you can get money back even if you don't owe taxes. That's a win for lower-income families. The qualified business income deduction is also being extended. This one's mostly for small business owners, freelancers, and people with...
So once again, benefit, benefit, benefit. But they don't tell you that. They just tell you it's bad. So far, 15 minutes into this video, the only really people that's hurt is if you're able and could work. Them the only people we see being hurt. If you're able, and then what else he said? If you don't got no disabilities or no dependents. But if you ain't got no disabilities and no dependents, you should be working. Jeez.
Side income. If you run a small LLC, work as an independent contractor, or have rental income, you may have already been using this deduction. Under the bill, it sticks around with some tweaks to the income caps and limits. And now for something a little newer, no tax on tips. If you earn money in tips, like restaurant workers, hairstylists, valet drivers, this part's going to stand out. The bill proposes eliminating income taxes on tipped wages. Sounds simple, but it's actually a pretty big shift in how the IRS handles reported income. This could increase take-home pay for millions of workers, especially in hospitality and service jobs. But of course, we'll have to see how the IRS plans to enforce it or prevent abuse. Right next to that is another headline piece.
Could end up with more money in the pockets of Americans if you in the restaurant business, hospitality, but any business that get tips ends up with more money for you. Sounds good to me.
No tax on overtime. If you're an hourly worker who puts in more than 40 hours, the extra money you earn for that overtime wouldn't be taxed under this bill. That's designed to reward hard work and incentivize people to take extra shifts. The catch is there may be income caps that limit who gets this benefit. So if your regular wages plus your overtime push you above a certain threshold, you might not get the full break. And then there's this one, no tax on car loan interest. If you're financing a vehicle, the interest you pay on that loan could be tax deductible under this bill. That's a new idea, meant to ease the burden of high auto loan rates. But again, there's fine print. You'll likely have to choose between this deduction and others, depending on how you file. And it probably won't apply to luxury vehicles. Another major piece is the creation of Trump accounts, which are being introduced as government-seeded savings or investment accounts for eligible individuals. The idea here is to encourage long-term savings, especially among young people and new parents. For a set period, qualifying families could get up to $1,000 seeded by the government into these accounts. That money could grow over time, similar to a Roth IRA or education savings account, but it would come with restrictions on how and when it could be used. Supporters say this is about building wealth from the bottom up. Critics argue that a one-time $1,000 contribution doesn't go far, especially for families struggling to make rent or cover groceries. And while it's being framed as a benefit for the middle class, the income phase-outs and limits could keep lower-income households from getting the full advantage. And something a lot of folks miss, many of the big deductions that used to exist before 2017 are still not coming back. Things like miscellaneous itemized deductions or the full state and local tax deduction are still limited. That means if you live a high...
So that's, he says, before 2017. So that means when the Democrats was in power, they didn't change it either. So don't put it all on Trump.
High tax state like California, New York, or New Jersey, you might not see a huge tax cut when all is said and done. There's also a cap on how much value you can get from itemized deductions overall. So even if you're donating to charity, paying mortgage interest, or dealing with large medical bills, your deductions might be limited based on your income level. A few other updates tucked in here. The bill keeps the ABLE account benefits, which help people with disabilities save money without losing access to federal aid. It extends the ability to roll over from a 529 college savings plan into an ABLE account too. That's a helpful bridge for families who save for college, but later realize the funds would be better used for disability-related expenses. And there's a continuation of the policy that allows student loans discharged due to death or disability to be excluded from taxable income. This was originally passed during COVID relief efforts, and now it's being made permanent. So yeah, there's a lot packed into this section. On paper, it's a big tax cut for working families, seniors, and small businesses. But the structure favors people who already have some financial stability. If your income is too low, you might not benefit from deductions because you don't owe enough taxes to begin with. If your income is too high, you might phase out of eligibility. And that middle ground, that's where the bill is really aiming. People who work full-time, earn enough to owe taxes, but not so much that they lose the credits. Seniors who still file returns, but don't have large retirement incomes. Families with multiple kids and 2 earners. For those groups, this could offer real relief. For everyone else, it may feel like a mixed bag. This section is part of Title VII, Chapter 2, and Chapter 4. It expands on some of the tax changes we talked about earlier, but with a specific focus on families, children, and savings. A lot of these policies are framed as ways to help working parents, caregivers, and future generations build a better financial foundation. And at the center of it all is something new, the Trump account. You'll hear a lot about this in the coming months, so it's worth understanding what it actually is, how it works, and what kind of impact it could really have. So, the Trump account, officially called a contribution pilot program, is a new government-backed savings tool. It's designed to automatically deposit up to $1,000 for every qualifying child born between 2025 and 2029. That money would go into a special investment account controlled by the child's family. And it's meant to grow over time through interest or market performance. The idea is to give each child a small head start in life, sort of like a baby bond or a government-seeded Roth account. Now, this sounds pretty promising at first glance, but the bill doesn't specify everything. There's still a lot of questions about who qualifies, how the money is managed, what investment options are offered, and when the funds can actually be used. And while the program is being promoted as a major benefit, $1,000 spread over 18 years without additional contributions won't create life-changing wealth. So in that way, it might feel more symbolic than transformational for most families. That said, for lower-income households who don't have access to savings tools at all, it's a start. If this program actually gets the support systems it needs, like automatic enrollment, no fees, and good financial education, it could grow into something more meaningful. But for now, it's a test run. Right alongside the Trump account is a group of tax credits aimed at helping families right now, not just years down the line. First up is the Child and Dependent Care Tax Credit. This is meant to help parents offset the cost of child care, which, as we all know, can be outrageous. Under this bill, the credit is expanded. The percentage of expenses you can claim goes up, and more families can qualify for the maximum amount. That's especially helpful for 2-parent households where both parents work full-time. There's also an expansion of the Dependent Care Assistance Program. That's the benefit some employers offer where you can set aside pre-tax dollars for childcare. This bill raises the limit on how much you can put into that account, meaning you can shelter more of your income from taxes if you use it for daycare or after-school care. And then there's the adoption credit, which gets a boost too. If you're adopting a child, especially one with special needs, the new rules make it easier to claim the full credit, and they broaden the definition of who qualifies. In fact, tribal governments are now recognized as having authority to determine whether a child has special needs. That's a meaningful update for Native families who often face unique adoption challenges. For people with disabilities, the bill enhances tax treatment of ABLE accounts, which are savings accounts that don't count against benefit eligibility. There's an increased contribution limit for these accounts, and you can now roll over money from certain retirement or college savings plans into them. That's a helpful option for families who started saving for one purpose and then found their needs changed. What's more, the employer-provided childcare tax credit is also expanded. This means if your job helps pay for your child's care, either through on-site programs or by subsidizing outside providers, your employer could get a bigger credit for offering that support. And ideally, that could encourage more companies to provide family-friendly benefits. And if you're a student or helping someone pay off student loans, the bill includes a small but noteworthy provision. The exclusion for employer payments towards student loans is being kept and extended. That means if your workplace offers student loan repayment assistance, you won't be taxed on the money they contribute. This provision was originally introduced as a temporary pandemic-era perk, but under the new bill, it sticks around a bit longer. The bill also tweaks what counts as a qualified education expense under 529 savings plans. Things like credentialing programs and certain post-secondary job training courses now qualify. That's helpful for students who aren't on a traditional college track, but still need specialized training to enter a trade or career. And just like with the senior deduction, these family credits phase out. If you're earning above certain thresholds, especially as a couple, some of the most generous parts of these benefits start to shrink. So families on the higher end of the income spectrum might still benefit, but not as much. So then, what's the bigger takeaway here? This section of the bill is clearly trying to position itself as pro-family, pro-parent, and pro-child. It offers a combination of immediate tax relief and longer-term savings incentives. But at the same time, it's layered with complexity, eligibility limits, caps, phase-outs, and uncertain implementation details. And while the Trump account is getting the most attention, it's arguably the part with the least guaranteed impact. A one-time $1,000 deposit sounds good in a headline, but unless it's paired with strong follow-up programs and support, it's not going to dramatically change someone's financial future. Still, it opens the door to a bigger conversation about how we support the next generation. This section appears under Title VII, Chapter 5, and it marks a major policy turn in the way the government approaches energy and climate investment. It's essentially split into two parts. First, it pulls the plug on a wide range of clean energy tax credits and subsidies, many of which were put in place to reduce emissions and support green innovation. Then, it shifts funding and tax incentives toward traditional energy like oil, gas, and certain industrial manufacturing. Supporters call this a return to energy independence. Critics see it as a rollback of climate progress. Either way, the impact is real and far-reaching, especially for people working in or investing in energy sectors. So let's start with the repeals. The bill terminates just about every major tax credit tied to clean energy that was passed over the last few years. That includes the previously owned clean vehicle credit, the new EV credit, credits for commercial clean vehicles, and even the refueling property credit that helped people and businesses install EV charging stations. All gone. That's not just a hit to buyers. It also removes financial incentives for car companies, developers, and infrastructure providers who are building business plans around these credits. If you were planning to buy an electric car and get some money back at tax time, that window just closed. Same goes for home upgrades. The residential clean energy credit, the energy efficient home improvement credit, and even the deduction for energy efficient commercial buildings are all being phased out or ended immediately. So if you're thinking about installing solar panels, upgrading insulation, or switching to more efficient heating, those incentives might no longer be available. That could slow down adoption for homeowners who are already on the fence. Now here's one you might not hear much about. The bill also removes or limits several energy production credits, like the one for clean hydrogen and investment credits for zero-emission electricity. Those were part of the broader strategy to move toward lower carbon energy production. Under this bill, they're either cut off or capped. They're also shutting down advanced manufacturing production credits, including those that support battery production and semiconductor supply chains. And that's a big one. Because even if you don't work in those industries, those supply chains affect everything from consumer electronics to grid reliability to electric vehicles. So that's the rollback part. What about the pivot? In subchapter B of this section, the bill shifts its support to America First energy policies, which means expanding tax breaks and financial incentives for fossil fuel producers. That includes things like clean fuel production credits, which sound like they support renewables, but in this case are being modified to include things like biofuels or natural gas derivatives, not necessarily wind or solar. There are also restrictions placed on carbon capture subsidies, meaning fewer incentives to store or offset emissions. But in the same breath, the bill reclassifies income from things like hydrogen storage, geothermal, and advanced nuclear as eligible for special tax treatment under publicly traded partnerships. That means companies in these spaces could start attracting more investors by offering tax-deferred income, much like oil and gas pipelines have done for years. They also allow deductions for intangible drilling and development costs, which is a tax break oil companies have used for decades. These costs, like planning, site prep, and equipment, can now be written off faster, which lowers the company's tax bills and incentivizes more drilling. And here's one that sounds niche, but really isn't. They're allowing special payments to individuals who die fuel. That's a reference to colored diesel fuels used in agriculture and construction. It's a small line item, but it shows just how deep this bill goes in trying to remove regulatory or financial burdens on traditional energy users. There's also a ban on extending the Advanced Energy Project Credit, which was one of the key tools used to lure clean tech companies into building factories in the US. Without that credit, it becomes harder to justify large, capital-intensive green projects, especially if they're competing against fossil fuel alternatives that just got new tax breaks. So, taken together, what does all this really mean? For one, it's a huge reversal of the direction we've been heading for the last 5 to 10 years. Clean energy industries that were scaling up with federal support will now have to rely more on private funding or cut costs. And that could slow job growth in those sectors or even trigger layoffs in places that were counting on green investment. Meanwhile, fossil fuel companies, drilling operations, and heavy manufacturing groups are getting a clear signal. Go ahead, expand. The financial incentives are back, the oversight is lighter, and the government's on board. That said, this section doesn't eliminate all green energy support. Some programs, like limited hydrogen development or geothermal investment, are still technically eligible for tax benefits. But overall, the tilt of this chapter is unmistakable. Less about reducing emissions, more about promoting US-based production, especially in oil, gas, and heavy industrial processes. If you're a homeowner, a small business owner, or someone who recently installed clean energy systems with the help of federal credits, this could be frustrating. If you're in the oil or drilling industry, it's the opposite. And for people working in jobs tied to solar, wind, or EV manufacturing, these changes create a lot of uncertainty. It's also worth noting, this section doesn't really include a lot of transition support. It doesn't offer funding to help clean energy workers shift into new roles. It's mostly a turn of the faucet from green back to fossil. And the speed of that shift will probably be felt most in rural areas, small towns, and industrial hubs that were betting on clean tech investment. This section is from Title 8, subtitles B through F, and it's all about education, especially how college is paid for and how student loans are handled. Now, this part doesn't wipe out debt or offer forgiveness the way some people hope for, but it does reshape the rules around borrowing, repayment, and how the government funds higher education moving forward. One of the biggest changes here is a new cap on how much students can borrow for graduate programs. Right now, if you're pursuing a master's, a PhD, or a professional degree like law or medicine, you can usually take out federal loans up to the full cost of attendance. But under this bill, that amount would now be capped at $50,000 total. Not per year, total. That's a huge shift. You can probably guess why this is controversial. For many graduate programs, especially private ones, $50,000 barely scratches the surface. So if this goes through, students would have to either come up with the rest out of pocket or look for private loans, which usually come with higher interest rates and fewer protections. Now, this change is being pitched as a way to control college inflation. The idea being that if students can't borrow unlimited sums, schools won't keep raising tuition unchecked. And while that sounds good in theory, The short-term effect could make graduate school less accessible for low and middle-income students. So yeah, this one's going to spark some strong opinions. Besides the loan cap, the bill also limits how loan forgiveness programs are applied. The popular public service loan forgiveness program and other income-driven repayment plans are not eliminated, but the bill tries to narrow their scope. That means fewer types of jobs would qualify, and the terms for forgiveness could take longer to reach. The argument here is that blanket forgiveness is too expensive, especially when paired with other spending cuts. But for borrowers who are counting on those programs to make their debt manageable, it might feel like the rug is being pulled out. What's more, the bill includes new reporting requirements for schools. Basically, colleges will now have to report the earnings of their graduates alongside their tuition rates. This is part of a value for money push. If your degree costs $80,000, but the average grad only earns $35,000 a year, that school might face penalties or lose access to some federal funds. It's meant to hold institutions accountable for their outcomes. And speaking of outcomes, the bill also goes after low-performing colleges, especially those with high dropout rates or heavy reliance on federal loans. These schools could see stricter oversight, and in some cases, they might be barred from accepting federal aid altogether. That's a serious blow for for-profit institutions, which are often flagged in this section. On the flip side, the bill expands Pell Grant eligibility for short-term credentialing programs, things like coding boot camps, nursing certifications, or skilled trades training. The idea here is to support students who want to build job-ready skills quickly, rather than commit to a 4-year degree. That's a pretty practical shift, and honestly, it reflects the way a lot of people are thinking about education right now. And if you're a student parent or caring for a dependent, there are a few updates here as well. Some of the changes we talked about earlier, like the dependent care tax credits, work alongside student benefits, especially if you're juggling family and school. It's not a full financial solution, but it helps lighten the load in some cases. Another subtle change? The bill adds more oversight for student loan servicers, the companies that collect payments and handle customer service for federal loans. They'll be required to meet stricter performance benchmarks, and there are new rules about how they report information and handle errors. This is good news for borrowers who've had frustrating experiences with poor communication or incorrect billing. And just a quick note, employers who help pay off student loans can still offer tax-free contributions under this bill. That's an extension of a pandemic-era benefit, and it sticks around for now. If your workplace offers it, definitely take advantage. So what does all of this mean in plain terms? Basically, we're seeing a shift from open access to tighter control. The bill aims to rein in college costs and limit government exposure to big loan balances. It does that by capping borrowing, tightening forgiveness, and scrutinizing how much value a degree actually provides. But it also raises real concerns about equity. If you limit loans without addressing tuition inflation directly, you risk pushing people out of graduate programs or into more expensive private debt. The changes to Pell Grants and short-term programs are a step toward modernizing education funding, but they don't entirely balance out the restrictions elsewhere. And the oversight piece, the school performance metrics, and loan servicer accountability, those could end up being the most impactful in the long run. They shift some of the responsibility back to institutions and away from students, which might be overdue. Still, for borrowers, students, and families trying to plan ahead, the uncertainty is real. The rules of the game are changing, and a lot of the old assumptions, like borrowing what you need and paying it off over time, don't apply the same way anymore. This section comes from Title IX and Title X of the bill, and it focuses on immigration, border security, and how the federal government plans to enforce and fund both. This part of the legislation is pretty detailed and honestly a bit loaded politically, but it outlines exactly where the administration wants to put its resources when it comes to immigration enforcement and processing. Right out of the gate, this section allocates new funding for the border wall. Yep, that same wall from the previous administration. The bill revives construction efforts, specifically stating that the Secretary of Homeland Security is required to resume building it. No delays, no legal loopholes. The money's already been appropriated, and the directive now is to use it. What's more, it limits the power of the Secretary to cancel or reprogram that funding. So even if a future administration wanted to stop the project, they couldn't just sign an executive order to halt it. This makes the wall funding a lot more locked in than it was before. And it's not just the wall. Border Patrol and IC receive big boosts in funding too. The bill greenlights money for hiring thousands of new agents, buying more surveillance tech, and expanding detention capacity. That means more officers on the ground and more facilities to hold people awaiting immigration decisions. Now here's where it starts to get more controversial. Asylum laws are changing too. The bill narrows the criteria for who can claim asylum, making it harder to qualify. For example, individuals must now meet a stricter, credible fear standard and may be disqualified if they pass through another country without seeking asylum there first. That last part's known as a transit ban, and it's been debated in courts before. Now it's codified in the bill. And for those who do apply, the bill aims to fast-track asylum processing, which sounds good, but in practice it means less time for legal review. That's raising concerns among immigration advocates who worry that people might not have enough time to present their case before being deported. Besides asylum, the bill raises certain visa fees to fund enforcement. If you're applying for a work visa, green card, or adjustment of status, you might be paying more under these new rules. Those fee hikes are meant to help cover the cost of expanded enforcement, but they'll also hit applicants directly in the pocket. Another thing, catch and release policies are restricted here. The bill says that border agents can't just release migrants into the U.S. with a court date unless specific legal conditions are met. Instead, it pushes for either detention or expedited removal, depending on the case. This policy has been used before, but the new language makes it much harder to undo in the future. Oh, and here's something you might not expect. The bill also includes a pause on work authorization for certain asylum seekers. That means people who apply for asylum could have to wait longer before they're allowed to legally work in the U.S., even while their case is being processed. That delay puts financial pressure on applicants and may deter some from filing in the first place. On top of that, there's a rule that allows state attorneys general to sue if the federal government doesn't enforce immigration law the way it's written in this bill. That's a big shift. It gives states more legal standing to challenge federal policy, especially if they believe border enforcement is being too lenient. And for border states, there's a separate clause that allows deployment of National Guard troops in certain cases without needing federal approval. That kind of authority could be used to bolster state-run immigration crackdowns, especially in places like Texas or Arizona. Now, critics argue that these changes could overwhelm the immigration courts, lead to more family separations, and force people to return to dangerous conditions. Supporters say it's about restoring order and deterring illegal entry. And honestly, both of those perspectives are already playing out in the public debate. So if you or someone you know is going through an immigration process or considering one, this bill makes the path more expensive, more time-sensitive, and more restrictive overall. Legal immigration isn't banned, but the rules are tighter and the costs are higher. And for asylum seekers, the window to qualify has gotten a lot smaller. And one last note, this section doesn't include any sort of broader immigration reform. No new pathways to citizenship. No expanded work visa programs. No relief for dreamers or long-term undocumented residents. It's enforcement heavy, with very little attention on long-term fixes. This part of the bill doesn't always get much attention, but it matters a lot because this is where you find the fine print. The timelines, the phase-ins, the expiration dates, and the hidden legal mechanisms that shape how this bill actually plays out in the real world. Let's start with when things take effect. Most of the major tax changes, benefit limits, and policy shifts begin on January 1st, 2026. So you won't see everything change overnight, but the clock is already ticking. Some of the Medicaid cost-sharing changes won't fully kick in until 2027 or 2028, and a lot of the student loan changes are timed to affect the next academic cycle. That's important because it gives Congress time to adjust or quietly let things expire before the next election. Speaking of expiration, Many provisions in this bill come with sunset clauses. That means they automatically end after 5 years unless Congress votes to extend them. Things like the senior tax bonus, the Trump account deposits, and even some of the healthcare changes are temporary on paper. That makes the bill look cheaper, but it also means nothing here is permanent unless it becomes politically popular enough to survive. Now here's where it gets more serious. This bill puts strong limits on how much federal agencies can delay or reinterpret what's written. The IRS, the Department of Health and Human Services, and the Department of Education are all required to enforce these rules as written. No more regulatory flexibility, even during emergencies. If the law says benefits must be cut, they have to cut them. If the rule changes eligibility, they have to enforce it. It ties the hands of future administrations and gives Congress tighter control. And if they don't enforce it, well, the bill gives legal standing to states and individuals to sue. So if a federal agency tries to soften or slow roll enforcement, a state attorney general or affected party can file a lawsuit to force compliance. That could lead to more court challenges, especially around controversial issues like immigration, benefit cuts, or agency power. But here's where it gets tricky. Buried inside Section 70302 is a provision that could limit your ability to get help from the courts, unless you can afford it. Under this clause, if you try to challenge the government's action or ask a court to pause enforcement, you may be required to pay a bond up front. If you can't post that bond, the court might not even hear your request. Legal experts say this could shut the courthouse door to regular people, especially those affected by benefit cuts, healthcare denials, or policy changes, unless they can afford to pay just to be heard. That's a quiet but powerful shift. It doesn't eliminate your right to sue, but it puts a price on exercising it. So what does all of this mean? The real power of this bill isn't just in the benefits it cuts or the policies it changes. It's in the way it locks those changes in, limits who can challenge them, and makes future reversals more difficult. Some parts might not seem urgent yet, but they're designed to stick and to keep you from undoing them easily. This is about structure, control, and making sure that what's passed today doesn't quietly fade away tomorrow. And that's the bill, or at least the real bones of it. The big beautiful bill might have sounded like just another piece of legislation, but now you've seen how each section connects back to everyday life. Whether it's your paycheck, your benefits, your internet, your future plans, the decisions in here shape what's possible, what's affordable, and what's protected. Some people are excited about these changes. Others are worried. But what matters most is that you're informed. Because no matter where you stand, understanding what's actually written in these laws is how we hold power and how we stay ready. So if any part of this breakdown helped you today, take a second to like the video and maybe share it with someone who might not have time to read a 900-page bill. Most people don't, but that's why we're here. And if you've got thoughts, agreements, concerns, questions, drop them in the comments. Let's keep this conversation going, because this stuff, it affects all of us. And yeah, we're in it together. Thanks for watching.
So there you have it. That's what's important in a 900-page big beautiful bill. The name of this page is Money Instructor. Go follow him if you want more information, because I couldn't explain this to you, and I damn sure wasn't going to read 900 pages. So go like, share, subscribe his page. Go like, share, subscribe his video. Go like, share, subscribe me for bringing you his video. Get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel. And like I say over here, I present you with the facts. I give you my opinion on those facts. And if you like how I do that, click that like, share, subscribe, hit the bell, click all so you can get notifications every time I drop one of these videos. And if you, with the bull, cut the shit.